In the summer of 1941, Adolf Hitler unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a military campaign that would become the largest land invasion in human history. The world watched in shock as the German war machine, meticulously prepared and brimming with confidence after victories in Western Europe, turned its sights eastward toward the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. The scale of the operation was unprecedented, dwarfing anything seen before on the battlefields of Europe. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by hundreds of thousands of vehicles, horses and artillery pieces, stormed across the Soviet border at dawn on June 22nd. The invasion stretched along a front nearly 2,000 miles long, from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. The sheer magnitude of men and material moving eastward was staggering, a testament to the logistical might of the Wehrmacht. The German plan was bold and ruthless: destroy the Red Army in a matter of weeks, seize the heart of Soviet industry, and capture Moscow before the infamous Russian winter could set in. German generals believed that a swift, decisive blow would shatter Soviet resistance and bring the campaign to a quick end. The stakes could not have been higher. The invasion was divided among 3 massive army groups. Army Group Center, the most powerful, was tasked with the direct thrust toward Moscow, the Soviet capital. Army Group North advanced toward Leningrad, aiming to cut off the Baltic region, while Army Group South drove into the rich agricultural lands of Ukraine. Each group had its own objectives, but all were part of a grand design to bring the Soviet Union to its knees. In the opening days, the German advance was nothing short of spectacular. The Luftwaffe, Germany's powerful air force, swept the skies, destroying thousands of Soviet aircraft on the ground and gaining air superiority. Soviet airfields burned, and the Red Air Force was caught off guard, suffering catastrophic losses. On the ground, Panzer divisions, Germany's elite armoured spearheads, drove deep into Soviet territory, executing massive encirclements. Entire Soviet armies were surrounded and destroyed or captured, with hundreds of thousands of prisoners taken in the first weeks. The speed and ferocity of the German Blitzkrieg left the Soviets reeling. By late summer, the Soviet Union seemed on the verge of collapse. German troops advanced rapidly, capturing city after city, while Soviet civilians fled in terror. Abandoned positions and burning villages marked the path of the invaders. The road to Moscow appeared wide open, and many in Berlin believed victory was within reach. Yet, not all was going according to plan. A stubborn bulge in the front line around Kyiv, fiercely defended by Marshal Semyon Budyonny and his troops, threatened the German advance. The Soviets, though battered, refused to break, mounting desperate defences and counterattacks to hold the city. This salient exposed the vulnerable flank of Army Group Center, creating a dangerous strategic dilemma for the Germans. If left unchecked, Soviet forces could strike at the German rear, potentially unraveling the entire offensive. Hitler, obsessed with the rich resources of Ukraine and the threat posed by the Kyiv salient, insisted that the city must be captured and the Soviet forces there destroyed. He saw the elimination of this threat as essential to securing the southern flank and ensuring the success of the entire campaign. The German High Command was deeply divided. Some generals argued for an immediate push to Moscow, believing that capturing the Soviet capital would end the war. Others, echoing Hitler's concerns, insisted on eliminating the Kyiv threat first. The debate grew heated, with the fate of the campaign hanging in the balance. Ultimately, Hitler's will prevailed. He ordered a shift in focus, diverting crucial forces southward to encircle and destroy the Soviet armies around Kyiv. This decision would have profound and lasting consequences, altering the course of the war on the Eastern Front. As the armies clashed on the fields around Kyiv, the fate of Moscow, and perhaps the fate of the entire world, hung in the balance. The outcome of these battles would shape the destiny of nations and determine the future of the Second World War. The Kyiv salient, a massive bulge into German-occupied territory, stood out on the map like a dagger pointed at the heart of the German advance. This protrusion, created by the Red Army's stubborn defense, was both a looming threat and a tantalizing opportunity for the German High Command. Its very existence challenged the German lines, creating a sense of urgency and danger that could not be ignored. Within this salient, over 800,000 Soviet troops were massed, forming one of the largest concentrations of soldiers on the Eastern Front. Their presence posed a significant risk to Army Group Center's push toward Moscow, threatening to strike at the German flank or even cut off their supply routes if given the chance. The sheer scale of Soviet manpower in the region was both impressive and intimidating. The Germans, acutely aware of the danger, feared a sudden Soviet counterattack from the salient. Such a move could wreak havoc on their overstretched supply lines, which were already struggling to keep up with the rapid advance. Every convoy and every map consultation was shadowed by the possibility of disaster if the Soviets broke out. Yet, the temptation to encircle and annihilate the Soviet forces was immense. The prospect of trapping such a vast enemy force promised a victory that could change the course of the campaign, freeing up German divisions for the final push toward Moscow and delivering a devastating blow to Soviet morale. For Stalin, however, Kyiv was more than just a military position. It was a symbol of Soviet resistance and pride. The city's defense became a matter of national honor, and the idea of retreat was unthinkable. Stalin's orders were clear. Kyiv must be held at all costs, no matter the sacrifice. He believed that by holding Kyiv, the Red Army could tie down vast numbers of German troops, preventing them from reinforcing the drive on Moscow. Every day the city held out was a day gained for Soviet defenses elsewhere. The strategic dilemma was stark. Should the Germans press on toward Moscow, risking a Soviet attack from the rear, or should they turn south to eliminate the Kyiv threat once and for all? The decision would shape the fate of the Eastern Front. For the Soviets, the question was equally agonizing. Should they stand and fight for Kyiv, risking encirclement and destruction, or withdraw to save their forces for future battles? The fate of hundreds of thousands hung in the balance. In both Berlin and Moscow, the decisions were driven not just by military logic, but by ideology, pride, and the willingness to gamble everything for victory. The stakes could not have been higher, and the consequences would echo throughout the war. As summer turned to autumn in 1941, the stage was set for a titanic clash. The fate of Kyiv, and perhaps the entire Eastern Front, would soon be decided in one of World War II's most dramatic battles. The struggle between Joseph Stalin and General Georgy Zhukov was not just a personal rivalry, but a pivotal moment that would shape the fate of the Soviet Union during World War II. Their clash of wills and philosophies defined the very core of Soviet military strategy at a time when the nation faced its gravest threat. Stalin, deeply influenced by his rigid ideology and a profound distrust of his generals, refused to consider any form of retreat. He was determined that Kyiv, a city of immense symbolic and strategic value, must be held at all costs, regardless of the mounting danger to his troops. His orders were absolute and dissent was not tolerated. General Zhukov, however, was a master of modern warfare and understood the realities on the ground. He saw the exposed Kyiv salient as a deadly trap, where the Red Army risked being surrounded and annihilated by the advancing Germans. Zhukov's experience told him that a tactical withdrawal was the only way to preserve Soviet forces for future battles. Zhukov argued passionately for a strategic withdrawal, urging Stalin to save the army rather than sacrifice it for a city. He believed that preserving manpower and equipment was essential for the long-term survival of the Soviet Union, even if it meant giving up ground temporarily. But Stalin, stubborn and unyielding, dismissed Zhukov's warnings. Viewing any suggestion of retreat as defeatism, he reassigned Zhukov, removing one of his most capable commanders from the immediate crisis. Meanwhile, within the German High Command, a similar debate was taking place. The German generals, confident after months of rapid advances, were divided over their next move. Adolf Hitler, obsessed with capturing Kyiv and encircling the Soviet armies, ordered Guderian's powerful Panzer group to turn south, diverting them from their original drive toward Moscow. Many German generals protested this decision, believing that the main thrust should remain focused on Moscow, the Soviet capital. They feared that splitting their forces would delay the campaign and stretch their supply lines dangerously thin. Despite their objections, Hitler's orders prevailed. The German armoured pincers began to move, converging on Kyiv from the north and south. Both sides, driven by conflicting strategies and leadership struggles, were now set on a collision course, preparing for a massive battle that neither side's commanders truly wanted, but could no longer avoid. The German encirclement of Kyiv was executed with precision. Guderian's Panzer group turned south, while Kleist's forces advanced north. The Soviet commanders, slow to react, were trapped by the German pincer movement. On September 16, 1941, the trap closed, encircling 4 Soviet armies. Over 600,000 men were trapped with no hope of escape. The encirclement was a masterpiece of German operational art, relying on speed and surprise. For the Soviet soldiers, the situation was hopeless, with supplies cut off and command structures collapsed. The encirclement sealed the fate of the Soviet Southwestern Front. The trapped Soviet armies fought with courage, but resistance was futile. The Germans systematically shrank the pocket, supported by relentless artillery and air attacks. The human cost was staggering, with over 500,000 Soviet soldiers captured. The material losses were catastrophic, with the Southwestern Front ceasing to exist. The road to eastern Ukraine was open for the Germans. For Stalin, the disaster was a brutal lesson in modern warfare. His refusal to heed Zhukov's advice led to the loss of experienced soldiers and equipment. The destruction of Soviet armies at Kyiv was a stunning German victory. However, the battle cost the Germans precious time. The diversion to Kyiv delayed the advance on Moscow, pushing the attack into autumn. By the time the Germans launched Operation Typhoon, the weather had turned. The autumn rains slowed the advance, and the Russian winter halted it. Zhukov, now defending Moscow, used the delay to prepare. The German offensive stalled, and the war would not end by Christmas. The question remains, if Army Group Center had not been diverted, could Moscow have fallen? Zhukov's proposal to abandon Kyiv was based on military reality. He understood that armies are more important than territory. A strategic withdrawal could have saved the Southwestern Front. However, Stalin's rigid command structure made retreat politically impossible. Zhukov's plan was sound, but Stalin's refusal ensured the army's sacrifice. Was the Battle of Kyiv a brilliant victory or a strategic error? The German encirclement was a tactical masterpiece, but it delayed the advance on Moscow. The delay pushed the attack into winter, giving the Soviets time to regroup. The debate centers on a what-if scenario. Could Moscow have fallen in September? The battle highlights the tension between tactical success and strategic goals. By turning south to Kyiv, Hitler may have won the battle but lost the war. Here's a simplified timeline of the Kyiv encirclement. June 22nd, Germany invades the Soviet Union. August 21st, Hitler orders the diversion to Kyiv. September 16th, German forces complete the encirclement. September 26th, the battle ends with Soviet defeat. For further reading, explore works by Earl F. Ziemke. For further reading, explore works by David Style. For further reading, explore works by Geoffrey Roberts. These sources provide insight into one of the most consequential battles in history.